Hello, welcome to the biography of Fred Keller, a famous American psychologist. Many things in this PowerPoint are hyperlinked, so when you click on certain things like names or pictures, it'll direct you to certain corresponding pages. I'll be interacting with these slides for the purpose of this presentation, but please email me if you'd like a shorter version with audio, if you want to go through at your own speed and learn about certain things in particular. I'm going to start by introducing my researcher, who is named Fred Keller. So I'm going to go over here and click on his name to begin. So here you can see some of the things that Fred Keller worked on. He's an American psychologist who's known for his educational plan involving individually paced learning and self-teaching. So his plan, called the Personalized System of Instruction, or the Keller Plan, has greatly impacted the higher level learning system. His work has had a great impact on the way that subjects are taught in college-level courses and highlights the necessity for self-pacing. In addition to this, Fred Keller also worked with his co-author, Schoenfeld, to create the Principles of Psychology, which is a handbook that defines many terms in not only applied behavior analysis, but the field of psychology as a whole. He lived from 1899 to 1996, but the research he did lives on in our classrooms today. Let's talk a little bit more about the principles of psychology. So I'm going to discuss some of the research articles that he did and the things that he did as a researcher. So you can see here when I bring my cursor over that the word researcher is hyperlinked. So when I go ahead and click on that, it's going to take me to both of these two main things that I'm going to be talking about today. So I looked at a variety of articles and books created by Fred Keller, but I want to go a little bit deeper into these two extremely important contributions to the field of psychology. The first one I'm going to talk about is the Principles of Psychology. So that's the one on the right here. I'm going to bring my cursor and click on the handbook, and it's going to take me to this page. In the Principles of Psychology book, Keller capitalized on many concepts, including but not limited to verbal behavior, thinking, concept formation, things of the like. He branched off of the ideas of B.F. Skinner and adapted Skinner's original reinforcement theory to apply to learning and the school system as a whole. His focus on learning and behavior made him the first scientist to apply Skinner's findings in the real world. He not only furthered these findings that Skinner had, but he also created new evidence specifically when it came to learning and education in his plan for a personalized system of instruction. So I'm going to go back to my main page by clicking on one of these books so that we can learn a little bit more about the personalized system of instruction. So we talked about the Principles of Psychology in the top right here. So now I'm going to click on the Keller Plan. And this is right here, that's his handbook. This is the second major contribution to the field of psychology and education as a whole that I think is extremely important from Fred Keller and the work that he's done. So let's start with a brief introduction to the personalized system of instruction. The Keller Plan is a student-centered approach in which responsibility is placed on the student more so than in other learning contexts. So according to this plan, courses will be split into modules or topics as they are in our course, and then those are split into units. Teachers are not viewed as being essential in their classic roles, but instead are used as more so proctors and monitors to see how things are going. So let's discuss this a little further. I'm going to click on components right here so we can talk about some of the components of the Keller Plan. So it involves self-paced learning and gives students an opportunity to go as fast as they can while also taking as much time as they need. The plan requires written and specific instructions only, not verbal or anything like that, and the classroom in general is only used as a location for test taking and asking clarifying questions instead of a regular classroom that we're used to, where you go in, you sit down, you talk to your peers, and then the professor teaches you. And then that wouldn't be self-paced because you're going at the pace of the professor, whereas self-paced is when you get to decide what speed you're going at. So the plan relies heavily on motivated learning and requires students to monitor themselves if they want to succeed. Let's discuss the concept of self-control and self-management because it definitely relates to this entire plan in general. I particularly want to discuss self-control and how it relates to Fred Keller's plan for self-paced learning. So we discussed the concept of self-control in our class reading, where self-control is defined as our ability to control our own behavior. And then there's a quote from Johnson that says, "We seem to control our own behavior as much as we control the behavior of others." So when it comes to control, we have this other quote, "We manipulate the variables that are apparently functionally related to the behavior of interest." So according to this concept, according to this quote, students using Keller's individualized learning technique will manipulate these variables related to the outcome they want. In this case, it's success in the class. You want to have success in the class, and so then you're going to work on your own even if you're not being constantly monitored or constantly reviewed. So in this case, studying without the help of others and engaging in self-paced learning is directly related to the level of motivation a student has to succeed. So this also ties into the concept of conscience. So let me get to the page about conscience here. So we have this quote that says, "Just as we're taught that we are responsible for our actions, we are taught to feel guilty or ashamed when behavior falls short of cultural norms." So just like self-control, which can impact how students complete their work without constant supervision, it's possible that conscience comes into a play. Societal pressure and guilt can serve as a motivation for students to try harder and put a higher level of effort in the work that they're doing. And we also were talking about things that we would do if we could interview our researcher. So obviously he's not around today, but I wish he were, because there are so many things that I would ask him. Many of my questions, much of it is related to both the Keller plan and the principles of psychology. Keller stressed the importance of self-paced learning while also defining many terms in psychology, but I wonder how he would relate the two. How would he relate his findings of the effectiveness of self-paced learning to reinforcement in general? I'm also curious what other populations Keller's plan might generalize to. So I'd ask the researcher if he thinks his plan is only effective for college students, or if it might apply to other populations, because he did a lot of research on many different types of populations, including, experiments or just viewing the environment. So if he could apply this to his Keller plan, I'm curious what his findings would be and what he thinks and how they'd relate. Lastly, I'd ask him about motivation. So his idea for individualized instruction and self-monitoring rely heavily on the expectation that people will do what's best for themselves and they'll actually do the work. So I'm curious about how this all relates. I'm curious about his thoughts on how self-control and conscience play a role in self-paced learning in ways I haven't even thought of. So I'm coming to the end of my slides. Here I have a list of articles and research that I used to create my paper and my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you learned a lot.